I'm Will.
And I'm Steven.
And this is the Post P Chronicles.
So, Will, who do we got today?
Man, we have a great man standing in front of us right now. Oops, he's not standing, he's sitting. But he's still in front of us, Timothy Jackson. What's going on, bro? Welcome to Post P, man.
Thanks for having me, man.
Most definitely. So, as always, we like to start with your youth. So, man, tell us your story, man. Where'd you grow up at? Where you from?
I grew up in Oceanside.
Oceanside,
okay. Yeah, all the way at the top of the city, man. The first city you run into entering San Diego County.
Okay.
Right after Camp Pendleton.
Right after Camp Pendleton. Yeah. And growing up in San Diego, you know, a lot of people from Oceanside be like, I'm not from San Diego, I'm from Oceanside. Were you one of those?
All I knew was Oceanside. I didn't even know.
I think it's the opposite. I think San Diego people are like,
oh yeah, we be tripping on them.
Oceanside ain't part of San Diego.
Oh, we be tripping on the show.
It's the same thing. But I think the reality is that there's
North
two
County.
different perspectives. It's like San Diego's like, they're not a part of Oceanside, and Oceanside's just like, I'm from Oceanside. But, you know, when you run into certain individuals, that mutual understanding of like we from San Diego is there. You know, it's just
definitely.
I think the perspectives is where you grow up at. You grow up, you know, in a certain part of San Diego, and that's all you understanding is like, this is San Diego. Or you grow up in Oceanside, where like that's what's coming out of your mouth is Oceanside versus Southeast San Diego, you know, East San Diego, or it's kind of embedded, you know what I'm saying? And so, yeah.
So how was it growing up at Oceanside?
It was tough, you know what I'm saying? Initially, I think I was born on the Camp Pendleton base in the Naval Hospital. Okay. And then my family moved to the east side of Oceanside because that lower part in the valley hadn't been like developed out yet, towards the back gate. But I think after like my first or second year, my family they ended up, you know, renting down there in that area when them developments kind of came about. And so, family was militant. Grandfather, you know, my dad was in the military, but I wasn't necessarily like, I guess you can say like I wasn't raised to get into like what was available for me to get into. It ended up just happening. So my life, I think, ended up becoming rough as a result of like choices I made, trying to deal with whatever was taking place in my life that, you know, none of us really, you know, like welcome, you know what I'm saying, when it comes to life circumstances with like your immediate family inside or your external family outside of the home.
So let's try to dig into that a little bit, right?
Sure.
Let's try to dig into that just for our
context.
Our context. So you're saying a lot of things are going on in the house, and in order to deal with that, you kind of just made your own choices and started going towards the street. But what were some of those things that you were dealing with? Your dad was militant, your grandfather was militant. They were both in the military. Were they hard on you?
Strict household?
Strict household.
I mean, you know, but I think more the things. So yeah, my grandfather, very strict household. You know, 2-time veteran in the Vietnam War. Pops, he was pretty much. You know, he was raised in Virginia. He was raised by pretty hard moms. Pops was pretty hard too. And so I think initially he didn't want to be that hard on me. I'm his first son. And so he did what he could up until, you know, he left when I was 8. And so my grandfather was ultimately left to take over the responsibility of raising me. And all he knew how to do was hard. You know what I'm saying? And so, but I think watching him raise my uncle, well, I won't say raise my uncle, because by this time, when I started seeing the things that would ultimately traumatize me, my uncle was raised, but now he's stepping in and out of the house, into the streets and back into the house, and he's experiencing what the streets offer. And at some point, you know, the more softer approach that I think my grandfather or my grandmother or my mother were trying to take to me, all of that got distracted once, you know, my uncle's behaviors and circumstances begin to grab attention from the family in another way. And so now my sister and I are beginning to be like kind of ultimately like neglected, based on their focus and wanting to
focus on him.
On
He
him.
got most of the
guys-
focus. He messing up.
You guys are put on the back burner for obviously their son.
Right, and so with that came ultimately, like my mom got caught up in addiction too. After my dad left, I mean, she probably started ultimately when, well, I won't say probably this. And when I came home from a prison situation, my last one, my mom ended up letting me know more of her context and like, in an apologetic way, hey, my bad, but this is really what was going on with me, and I apologize, and had to affirm her by letting her know like I made my own choices. Right. You know what I'm saying? But it explained like her neglect, because I thought she was focusing on my uncle too, when really what was happening was like her addiction began to pull her further and further away from the house.
She
and
was
deeper
fighting her
into
own
the streets.
battles.
Right, and she was escaping what was taking place with her in the home that I had no clue, because I'm a kid. So it's like I can't really see. A lot of her battles with my grandfather and grandmother were silent, because she was the oldest, 10 years older than my uncle and aunt. So a lot of that stuff was happening when I was asleep. My uncle's stuff was happening
While you was awake.
while I was awake, and I was starting to see violent, like physical altercations with him and my grandfather. And I think just because of the way my heart was made, that kind of like, I was the kind of kid where like when Menace to Society or Boys in the Hood or these movies was coming out and my uncle was watching them, I was watching them. When people got killed I would cry. You know what I'm saying? Like I just, death and like all of that stuff kind of scared me. And so when that stuff was happening in my home, it pushed me out of the house in a different type of way. You know what I'm saying? And so I kind of like found myself aligned with individuals who I think were probably experiencing the same, but these were families from like Indiana that migrated from a military background too, but just settled in the valley. And so, it's, an upward of like 30 to 35 of us who are all, outside of the house looking for comfort in ways that I think ultimately before we even started gangbanging and living a more like chaotic life, expressing the chaos that was going inside of us, we kind of just found like solace in one another's presence, you know what I'm saying? And then, between football, basketball, baseball, and other things that kind of gave us that outlet to kind of express, we would make it count in that way. But then eventually, as years progress and you kind of transition from elementary to middle to high school, the temperature and the environment, in each setting we stepped into began to change and kind of divide us more, which kind of introduced me to more of like a reason to be to express myself violently.
Right. So it's because to me, what really stood out to me was you said when you were watching Boys in the Hood and Menace to Society, and they would die and you would cry because you feared death. But everything that you were going through in the house pushed you to the things that you feared most.
Right.
To the streets, to death, to destruction. And how did that sit with you? Because now you're back. Now you're out in the streets. And I'm assuming you're young. How old are you at this time when you step off the porch?
13.
Se?
Like
13 years old.
11, like 10, 11, 12. And this is the thing is like my mom and my uncle were very in Oceanside. Between the Hispanic, Samoan, and African American culture, there was a time where unity was a reality. It was more, man. Like
'cause it's not like that.
It's not like that. And it
that's
probably
why my eyebrow went up.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
what?
probably like I'm a proponent and I'm an advocate for that unity actually. And I'll share something that took place last night that I think, anything is possible to those who believe, you know what I'm saying? And I'm a proponent for believing. I believed myself into a situation where I was freed from prison 8 years earlier than, my maximum possible release date, or at the time my EPRD said. So I don't, things were happening in Oceanside at a certain time that I think between the culture in LA and the culture that was taking place more so down in Southeast San Diego or more southern San Diego, a lot of things weren't culture-wise, weren't taking place in Oceanside just yet. I think late 70s, maybe early 80s.
Now, what specifically are you
Just
referring
talking
to?
about gang culture.
Right.
Drugs were, crystal methamphetamine had already pretty much swept. Heroin and crystal had already swept. My mom was caught up in that sweep. Her whole generation is caught up in that sweep. My mom's 62 now. I think that whole 60s, 50s and 60s, like that whole generation got swept up in that crack, methamphetamine and heroin. That began to affect our families, but the point I was trying to make is that my uncle and my auntie, my uncle and my mom, uncle being 10 years younger than my mom, they were a part of those two generations, the late, early 50s, early 60-year-olds who were starting to experiment with those particular drugs in Oceanside. But they also all had kids, and a lot of us were in the same garages, we were in the same backyards, and we were at the same functions in the mid 80s. If you lived down in that valley, or if you lived up on the east side, depending on your family structure, and there was a little bit more of a unity. But once the gang culture began to be, I think, more televised, and what was taking place in penitentiaries began to be more, I think, promoted to take place in neighborhoods as far as division, that stuff started to, I think, just encroach, like push around a lot of the unity in Oceanside when certain individuals started coming back from the penitentiary. And I think that put individuals such as myself, who grew up seeing Samoans and seeing Hispanics and going to Samoan birthday parties and Hispanic birthday parties, or them coming to mind in a different, seeing it in a different light now. Because not only am I being put in a position to where, my mother or my uncle is starting to transition into doing time in jail now, and I'm growing, and a lot of these individuals that, see me as a kid, they going to jail too, and they doing this time, and they coming home, and they don't recognize me because I've grown. I've also grown with this nucleus of dudes who are African American, and this racial thing began to happen in Oceanside, to where if you black, you know what I'm saying? You a Crip. If you Samoan, you a blood. And if you Hispanic, you a Sereno. You know what I'm saying? Or a Southsider. And so there is no more, he can't come over here. Or, and so we all, at one point, we throwing footballs and playing basketballs, and then next thing you know,
can't hang out anymore.
Throwing bullets at each other. You know what I'm saying? And you can't, but yeah, man, there was a.
When do you think that started?
I know.
Or when do you know it?
Yeah, I know it started. As far as the killing,
the real racial, because I always associate. That's how we associate Oceanside. Like, it's all racial up there. Down in Southern California, San Diego, Southeast. Like, there's no, essentially, blacks kill the blacks, and Hispanics kill the Hispanics, and so on and so forth. But up there, it's all, you look different, that's my enemy. When did that happen?
I think contextually it differs for each neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? So you have the West, the Crips who function mainly off of Division Street, or the West Side Crips, versus the Crips who function more off on the East Side, versus the Crips that function down in the Valley. I think all of the rivalries and warring started at different times. Right. All within probably the same 5 to 6, 7 year period, but depending on, I think the context of, the murder would determine, I think, how deep and how long, it went. But I would say like 84, 85, and at that time, I was born in 81, so I think 84, 85, was when the first, I think, fallouts began to happen. Fisticuffs turn into just little stabbings, and then the majority of certain generations is being, focused on by law enforcement. We got to get this generation out of here, and then they coming home, and then I think between that 87, or I know 87 to 92, is when the murders just went, crazy. And then 92, 91, 92 is when I think Oceanside got this crazy murder. Obviously, we're not a capital, but per capita, the murder rate in Oceanside was like the highest in a specific region of California. And it was just, all racial ward, you know what I'm saying? Like, but yeah, I think once that started taking place more in the Valley, which was 91, 92, it just changed everything, man. And I think a lot of us felt, I don't want to say pressured, but a lot of us felt obligated to be, to not be victims, you know what I'm saying, of what was possible, you know what I'm saying?
So you not being a victim, you caught up in it. You say the Valley, so I'm assuming Deep Valley. I don't want to assume, but Deep Valley, and I would imagine like you full fledged, you all the way in this, and usually if you all the way in, it's two routes: death or in jail, and you're sitting right in front of us right now. So obviously it had to be jail. So when did you first get locked up?
I got locked up first in 94.
94 for what?
1994 for, it was an attempted murder, and it was a blessing, man. Like, it was an attempted murder, and I was named by someone as someone who was last seen with a group of individuals before this situation took place. And because I was the youngest, I was one of the ones that was obviously targeted by law enforcement to be someone who could potentially tell, you know what I'm saying, because everybody else was older. And so, yeah, they snatched me up, and, my mom's at the time was living in a particular area of Oceanside, and she was in and out for, like, drug stuff and fraud stuff. And I'll never forget the dude, he knocked on the door, his name was Sykes. He knocked on the door, and my mom, she didn't open the door. And usually she'll open the door, and it made me, at this time, I'm 14, I had looked out the window, and I seen it was Sykes. I recognized who he was.
Sykes is
he's a drug investigator. He's usually like a drug investigations officer. But I guess he had been transitioned over to like homicides or attempt homicides or something. And he was the one, and came and did it was just him. You know what I'm saying? He came, he told my mom that I was under arrest for attempted murder, and that I needed to be taken down to the station for further questioning, and that she could come or whatever. My mom was too distraught though, and I think she was just like confused, and she let him take me. You know what I'm saying? And then I ultimately got dismissed from that case because a relative that was involved in that same situation, he ended up making a statement that whatever happens, this individual right here he had nothing to do with nothing. You know what I'm saying? And it corroborated with everything that I pretty much shared. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know nothing about nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just, I want to go home. You know what I'm saying? Like, I kind of, I don't want to say I played into that younger card, but I was 14, and I just, and then the next time was 2 years later, when I was 16, and this time it was a lot. It was the same thing, attempted murder, but it was me that they apprehended moments after a certain situation happened. I was blessed to get dismissed from that, but with that, the victims didn't want to testify, so it put me in a situation to where the judge still didn't want to let me go. He wanted to bound me over to like a 365-day campo situation. My grandfather was like, he can't come back to my house. If you keep him till he's 18, he can't come back to my house. You know what I'm saying? Like, if I can't see him into his 18, you can't expect me to trust that he's going to go. And my grandpa, he comes from, the military is what it is. In his time, he came from a very like racial period of the military. So he had a systems perspective, and he didn't want me to go into a system. He was like, take him, but you better have somewhere for him to go when you release him.
Right.
You're not going to release him at 18 years old, a grown man, after being in your system.
I don't know who's coming back to my house.
I don't know who's coming back to my house. You know what I'm saying? And so the judge was like, well, do you have any family members that stay in other states or whatever, and my grandpa was like, "You got this bright idea," but for me, wasn't because me and my auntie didn't get along. You know what I'm saying? But she had just transitioned to New Orleans, where her husband was stationed, and one thing led to another. You know, the judge was like, you know, if you have someone that stays in another state, we can consider having his probation. It was like a contract situation where he'll do some time, his probation will transition, he'll get out and go to this state, and when he either turns 18 or gets off for probation successfully, he can come back to California. And my grandpa was like, well, I got a daughter, you know, who's in New Orleans, and if that's not too far out of the jurisdiction or whatever, you could send him there. But my mom had to sign over custody. And my mom and my auntie at this time weren't getting along either. So my mom told my lawyer at the time, if he signs yes, then yes. You know what I'm saying? But my mom assumed that I was going to sign no. And I thought the same thing. I said, if my mom signs yes, if my mom says yes, then, no, I said, I'll sign yes, but I know my mom's going to sign no. You know what I'm saying? I signed yes. My mom see me sign yes. And then my mom, I think she didn't vocally, but she did, like, I think emotionally she shared with me, like, in her own way that she was pissed off, you know what I'm saying? She was upset that I agreed that my custody be given over to my auntie. But she ended up signing yes because she seen me sign yes.
So real quick, you're a teenager going through all this. I know in the middle of it, you're thinking, I'm stuck in the middle of this, but you're actually bringing all your family into this drama.
Yeah.
You know, not how does it affect your family? How's it affecting you at this point? You're like, man, I got all this family drama going on. I'm getting sentenced. Am I going to Louisiana? Am I going here? My grandpa doesn't want me. My mom signed me over. What's going on in your mind right now?
If I'm a man, I think about that still today because I got my own kids now. You know what I'm saying? So it affects me in a major, major way. I think about how the judge also asked my mom in front of everybody, do you, like, what about you, Miss Jackson? Do you have a place for him to come home to if he comes home when he's 18? And my grandpa was like, nope. And my mom was, because my mom was staying with him. You know what I'm saying? So it was like, I just felt, I think these are like the first few times I started to feel like what abandonment feels like, or what like neglect. But it was, I'm older now, so I know that it was not, they weren't intending to abandon me. My grandfather just, this is brand new for them. Like, he don't know. I mean, I'm his grandson. He raised me up, and then I get these attempted murder charges. It's already kind of, I think, shifting his perspective about what he's done. And I think sometimes between my mom and my grandfather and others that had the opportunity to raise me up, a lot of them didn't know where they went wrong. And so I think the best thing for them to do is, since I'm doing what they would consider grown man activities, just let me grow up by pushing me away. You'll find out the hard way.
So even though it's your fault at that age, you're taken as this traumatic event of abandonment.
Right.
And they just, you know, you can look back now and be like, they didn't know what to do with me. But when you're a kid, it's all about you. University revolves around you, and you're like, everyone's abandoning me right now. And not seeing the crime you did, you're just seeing the abandonment of your loved ones.
Right, but the thing about when you're I think when you're gangbanging and you're caught up, as much as you try to, you know, as much as I was definitely trying to believe, like, I'm gonna ride till I die, I'm gonna do this till I'm gone. Like, it's moments where you're in these specific incarcerated situations for your first times doing time that it weighs on you, and you understand, like, even you're going through hallways, you're going to the courtroom, you're talking with lawyers, you're seeing your family, you know, you're kind of trying to understand the weight of your decisions. Like, I'm involved in an attempted murder, but when you're also battling the fact that if your family wants you or not, if your family can take care of you or not, that stuff was like, because the judge was asking, like, I think wholeheartedly, like, Ms. Jackson, you know, you've been silent. You know, what can you share with us, you know, as far as support for your son? And I think that was the first time, like, I was just like, my mom had no answer for him, and no answer for me deep down inside, like what I was really screaming out. 'Cause, you know, I was molested at 8. You know, walked in, my mom had a needle in her arm at 8. Like, right after my dad left, it just seemed like these things just began to happen. Finding crystal pipes, my uncle's pipes. Like, it was just, so all of that, when you in them silent cell types of situations, then you're going into these court proceedings, then you're going back to the cell, and you just like, somehow it just takes form with you, and then it becomes a part of your costume and your exterior, your hard shell.
I'm listening to you, and what's resonating with me is the attempted murder charges. When you're out here doing this stuff, like, you feel like a grown man. We feel like grown-ups. You live in all, how do you not? You know what I'm saying? But then you get into court, and then you become a kid again, and it's like, I just want my mom. I just want my granddad. I just want somebody.
Someone to stand up
just
for me.
Somebody to stand
love
up
me.
for me.
Someone take me in.
But right before that, it's like, I'm him. Like, you in the streets, and you stomping in the streets. You really, like, you that guy, you grown man. But, man, we just really kids. And I'm hearing you sitting here, grown man, and looking back, me, myself in the same shoes. And what do you tell a kid that's going through that same situation now? What would you tell him sitting right here, thinking he big, bad,
right? Real
big and bad, you old, I'm him, I'm doing all this stuff. What would you tell him?
Ultimately, that's like a position I'm in every day today. You know what I'm saying? Where I have the opportunity to tell. And I started out, especially after I came home from the situation, I started out like telling the kids what I believed like I would want to hear at that time. Until like some of these kids just were open and honest and were just giving me honest feedback. And some of these kids were like, hey, like, your name is Timothy, and my name is such and such. You had your experience and I'm having mine. I appreciate the support and I appreciate your encouragement. But, just let me see you walk your life out. Keep being present with me. You know what I'm saying? Because I've been following words all my life, and that's how I ended up. I've been affected by words all my life, and that's how I ended up. So it's crazy. Like, when I first started mentoring, I remember one youngster, he told me straight up, he was like, man, all I got is my trauma. And it seems like, you trying to take that from me too. You know what I'm saying? My mom tried to drown me when I was this age, and my brother, and this, that, and the third. He was like, but I survived it. And so you trying to take my survival from me? You know what I'm saying? He was like, with all due respect, bro, just walk your life out in front of me. That's the best thing you could do for me. And just ask me to follow you. But so it's like, these days, what I would tell myself is that your mom loves you, bro. Your grandfather loves you. Your coach who snatched you up in front of all of them people, that's the only way he could love you. Your uncle who put you up on a wall in front of people at school, it's the only way they could love you. You know what I'm saying? Like, but I took that the wrong way. And it made me more aggressive. It made me, more reactive and not responsive. You know what I'm saying? And so telling myself at 14, 15, 16 is like, bro, you're going to face life at 24. When you come home, you're going to face life at 25 too, and you're going to face life at 26. You know what I'm saying? And at 26, you're going to go away for a sentence of 17 years, 8 months. And you're going to be put in a position where you're going to have to choose God or choose your homies. And then you're going to choose God, then you're going to make it home. And then you're going to have the opportunity to do this all over again. But from the perspective of, you being a real man.
I want to leave it right there.